Hey everyone, Joe Waxman, the astrologer here. Eh, what's up, everyone? How you doing? In this video, I want to talk about the planets um, according to their actual physical characteristics. Right? I'm not looking at mythology in this, where I'm just going to derive meaning about from their physical qualities. Um, so yeah, guys, before I begin, please hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and book a reading with me, macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. It's my email. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. All right, so let's just get a visual for this. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Now here's a graphic image of our solar system. Obviously, it's not to scale, but it's, showing relative differences in sizes and distances. Obviously, things are going to be way more, it's condensed, right? It's way further out. I mean, obviously, right? But proportionally, even. But if we start with the sun, obviously, okay, so the sun, what is the sun? And not referring to mythology. And one of the reasons I want to do this is because sometimes, we have these kind of baked in ideas about the planets and their meanings and what they are. And then sometimes we completely skip over the obvious facts of the planet and go directly to the mythology. And I think that's wrong, right? I think we need that the primary way to derive meaning from the planets is through their physical qualities. And so I in this video, I'm attempting to make a case for that, right? So the sun, obviously, the sun is like something like 99% of the mass of the solar system, right? It's huge. It's absolutely all the planets could easily fit inside the sun, in a very small portion of the sun, right? So the sun is absolutely massive. It's a star, it's light, it's bright. We don't live on the sun. We live here on Earth. That's important to understand and to think about conceptually because that's relevant. Sometimes people get very abstract in their head about astrology, right? They don't ground it in reality, and they make all these weird, abstract connections. And they're somebody was saying, trying to make a case, they're like, we are the sun because blah 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 blah. And I'm like, that's just literally ridiculous. Like, well, because stardust, and it's a very abstract. It's reaching instead of just being physical, just being like, get out of your head for a minute, just start like hitting yourself. Like, where am I? I'm fucking here. Am I on the sun? Do I live on the sun? No. I mean, it's just like, where am I more? Am I more here or am I more on the sun? It's not hard. This is not rocket science. Like, we're here, right? We're here on the fucking earth. That's our home. It's not our home is not on the sun, right? It's like I get that the sun is huge and it's massive and it informs like a huge portion of our personality, right? But at our core, we're not our personality. And I don't know how to make this any more clear. Just start hitting yourself if it's confusing for you. Just start smacking yourself. And if you're still confused after like that, start punching yourself in the face because I mean, really, like this couldn't be any more clear. And if you still can't understand it, if you still think you're the sun, astrology is not for you. Really go do something else because you're too abstract. You're not grounded in reality. And there needs to be, because astrology is so woo-woo and out there, we need to ground it in reality. That's the only way it makes sense. We need to constantly come back to the earth and say, okay, where are we? We're here. All right, let's start from there. We're right here, right? We live on the earth. We don't live on the sun, okay? Right? This is my home. I live, in Philadelphia, not on the sun, right? So let's be real about that, okay? The sun is not our home, but it is huge, right? And it's just, if you need to understand the difference between you and the sun sign, just just start staring at maps of the solar system. There's many of them. This is just one. But like Earth over here, sun over here. Sun obviously huge. Earth spinning around the sun. We don't live on the sun. We live on Earth, right? So that's the difference between sun sign and Ascendant would be where the sun rises, right? So it would be this angle, like particularly like where we are, wherever we are on the earth, our physical, our individuality, because we have to talk about ourselves as an individual, because even though like if you study spirituality, you might come to some sort of understanding that we are everything, we are God, we are nothing, there is no real self. Like, how do we define ourselves? Obviously, we could get into that, and that's very philosophical, metaphysical. We are not our body, we are our experience, right? But we are the consciousness, we are the screen upon which our experience is projected upon. But yeah, I forgot where I was going. So we are, but yeah, our individuality is located somewhere on this little ball, the earth, right? And it's going to be different for everyone, and we were born in a particularly unique place, time and place, and that represents our individuality as this dream, this Leela, this Maya, this play that on this earth, on this lifetime, this incarnation, right? We have that's what astrology is trying to represent, like the particular place and time where we were born, and what it means for us in our life, right? So that's all about there's a single point in time on this little ball here on the earth that represents us, and then the sun sign represents the center of our solar system, which is a huge portion of our personality, right? It's the bulk of our personality, our sun sign, but it's not us, right? Just as we are not the sun. I don't know how to make it any more simple. If you're gonna write "we are the sun," I just fuck off. Like I don't have any time for you. Like you're too dumb to be on. You shouldn't be listening to me. If you think we're the sun, just I'm not for you. Like go, like I don't know, do whatever you're doing. Like I got no time for that. Really. I mean, it's just like I can't cater to stupid people. I really can't. I have no patience for them. So anyway, yes, we are not the sun, but the sun is it's light, right? It's light. And if we think about terms of light, that makes a lot of sense, right? But it's only there half the time, right? The sun's not half the time, the sun is gone, right? Half the time we don't see the sun. The sun is there half the day, the 24-hour period, and gone half the 24-hour period. But we still exist when the sun's not there, right? And so that also is a clear indication of the sun's influence on our personality, on our life. It's there 50% of the time. It's not there 50% of the time, depending on where you live. Sometimes more, sometimes less, right? If you live at the extremes of the poles, near the poles, half the year it's going to be there way more than not, and then another time way less than there. But generally speaking, half and half, right? But what happens at night? Do we disappear? Like, I wonder, of all the people who think we are the sun, we are our sun sign, do you disappear? Do you stop being? Do you stop existing at night? You don't fucking stop existing at night, but you do change, right? At night, we're not the same as we are in the day, right? Some people are night people, like back in the 80s, we had like the up all night, sleep all day, party all night, sleep all day, right? That kind of thing, the rock and roll lifestyle, which some people still do. But most of us, we're up in the daytime and we sleep at night, right? Or if we're up at night, we're doing different things than we are in the day. Like we have our daytime routines, which are go to work, right? And then at night we might go out to dinner and we dress differently. We if put on makeup or whatever. If you're a girl, like do the hair, and the guy might put on a nice suit or a nice outfit or whatever, right? But it's different than the day. We try and look a little more for women usually, but some men are do it as well. But clearly there's a difference between night and day, right? And that has to do with the influence of the sun. The sun is a very daytime influence, and so the sun sign is going to be much more relevant in the daytime, in our daytime life. It's going to be active whether we're interacting with the world or not, right? But even in that case, when we're out in the world, we have a persona that is different from like when we're just like alone in bed, maybe with our partner. There's a little bit of a difference. You can tell it's still there. You can still see your sun sign. You can still feel your sun sign when you're alone in bed at night and you're just about to go to sleep with your partner. You're not putting on any any sort of mask, any sort of, trying to impress anyone, putting it on, right? You're putting it on. The sun is a little bit of a put on. It is, right? It's easy. It comes naturally, but it is still, it's our relationship to the world. It's not our truest, authentic self. Like if you want to know your truest, authentic self, right before bed, in bed, no sort of masks or pretenses or false personas, no trying to impress anyone. You're just being completely, utterly yourself. That's more your ascendant, right? The ascendant doesn't go anywhere. The ascendant, the angles are always there because that represents you. That represents the specific time and place that you were born for your unique individuality. 1 out of 8 billion, right? There's nobody like you. And that's not your sun sign, right? Sun is too general. The sun is the same for everyone. Same for everyone on the planet. Wherever the sun is at any given time, it's the same for everyone, right? It doesn't really matter. It's not personal at all. Sun doesn't give a shit about you as an individual. I'm sorry, right? Sun is not going to shed one little tear if you die. Doesn't give a fuck, right? It's just irrelevant, right? So that's the sun sign. Next we go to Mercury, right? And a good way to understand this is comparing and contrasting, right? So Mercury is very fast. Mercury is actually the fastest planet if we're not looking at the moon, right? Moon's not really a planet, but moon does move faster than Mercury, but Mercury out of the planets, the actual planets, is the fastest moving, right? But compared to Venus, right? Mercury moves fast, Venus moves slower, right? Venus still moves pretty fast. But how do we get that the Mercury rules communication and the intellect, whereas Venus rules like feelings and love and romance and joy and beauty, right? Aesthetics, all the Venusian qualities. Why wouldn't Mercury rule all the Venus archetypes and Venus rule all the Mercury archetypes? Because if you think about it, just put it in simple terms, thinking versus feeling. We need to think fast and feel slow, right? Just to put it really, really simply. Because if you have it in reverse, then you're dumb and your feelings are fleeting, right? It's like, I love you, I don't love you. Let's all just like, you want your feelings to be slow because you want that drawn out experience of having stable feelings about things, right? What happens like if your family is like, your mother is like, oh, I love you today, I don't love you tomorrow. I'm neutral the next day. It's like, that's fucked up. That's not right, right? We want our feelings to be slow and consistent, and we want our thinking to be fast because, what happens when the bear is attacking you? You got to think fast. You got to move fast. You got to have a quick, aerated mind, lucid mind in order to survive. If your mind is slow, you're going to be dead. You're going to get killed, right? So we need that fast thinking mind, and that's what Mercury represents, is the speed of thought. Also, since we live on the Earth, Venus is closer to the Earth than Mercury, right? Which is more personal, thinking or feeling? Feeling is way more personal than thinking. Thinking, we need to be impersonal because we need to be able to think objectively. And that's why Mercury is closer to the sun, Venus is closer to the Earth, right? Mercury's faster, Venus is slower. So it's fast, objective thinking and slow, personal feeling. That's the Mercury-Venus archetype. Excuse me. Venus being very close to the Earth. Obviously, again, we're not living on the sun because Mercury is not the most personal thing, whereas Venus is less personal. Like, oh, I love you, but I've taken my thoughts way more personally. Like, that's backwards, right? Love has to be more personal than our thoughts, our rational thinking, right? Sometimes we have to objectively use our rationality to overcome our feelings, but still, that's tough. It's not easy, right? You're in love with a person, but your mind is saying that it's not good. That's a difficult situation, and I'm not saying that the feeling is more important than the rationality, but one is definitely more personal and closer to the heart, right? But there's no argument about that. Like, you have to be a robot. You have to kill your feelings, your heart, in order to say that mind, Mercury, is more personal than Venus. There has to be no Venus. You have to kill that part of yourself in order for that to happen, right? But love has to be love, feeling, emotion, right? Romance, all these things. That has to come before, or at least more in a personal sense, closer to the heart, closer to home than the intellect, right? And so those two qualities are evident just in that, just in this right here. We don't need to go into mythology. And that's really important to understand, right? A lot of the core meanings, the core concepts of the planets are found here. They're not found in the mythology, right? But people just automatically go to the mythology, and it's wrong. It's backwards. It's the cart before the horse. The mythology maybe, you know, fills in the blanks, fills in the details, adds little flavor here and there, but really it's about the size and position and relationship of the planets, right? Mercury is like, I don't there Mercury has some weird qualities to it, like it's very vertical in its uh rotation, and it spins very slowly, so there we could probably derive a lot from that. I'm not this is just more of a basic understanding, conceptualization of the meanings of the planets according to their relationships, their position, size, qualities, right? So Venus is very close to the Earth. Venus, obviously, ruling emotions, feelings. Now, if we compare and contrast Venus and Mars, because obviously Earth is us. We're just saying Earth is us. We're not really giving it much meaning. It's our home. It's Mother Earth, right? Um, but Venus and Mars. So why is Venus on the inside, Mars on the outside? Why isn't the meaning significations of Mars in Venus, or vice versa? Why don't we say Venus is love and emotions, or Mars is love and emotions and feelings and beauty and aesthetics, and Venus is, you know, aggression, action, muscles, war, right? Doing things, separating. Why is that, right? Because one is on the outside, one is on the inside, right? Where is war? Where is our aggression located? On the inside or outside? Really, it expresses itself on the outside, but where does emotions and feelings go? On the inside, right? We feel love, we feel aggression too, but we act out on it with our physicality. So Mars is all about the physicality. It's about the muscles. It's about the secondary development, right? Muscles need development. You know, war needs some outward expression, right? You need weapons, you need fighting, you need action. It's not just war, but like getting shit done, right? It's all about the external. It's about taking action. It's about being physical. And so we have this balance, this dichotomy between the two most personal planets. We're not talking about the moon yet. I'll get to the moon in a second. Between Venus and Mars, right? Mars on the external, Venus on the internal. I love you on the inside, and I'm going to fight for you on the outside. Or I'm going to work for you. I'm going to do shit. I'm going to, you know, make change. I'm going to act, right? That's Mars. And that's out in the world. That's external. Internal is because I feel all these things inside. I love you. And I you know, beauty and feelings and emotions and all that, right? These are very personal. Mercury, less personal, right? Thinking, communicating, objective rationality, logic, right? Computer. The Mercury is more computer, right? That's not personal, right? That's just objective. And then we get to the moon. Moon's most personal, right? Because moon does not revolve around the sun. Moon revolves around the earth, right? So moon, we only see half the time, basically, like the sun. And in fact, we only see any of these planets half the time when the sun is below the earth, right? When it's nighttime. That's the only time when we can see any of these planets, right? Moon sometimes, because it's so close, we sometimes see in the daytime, but generally speaking, we see it at night. And there we have like the whole thing about the waxing and waning, new moon, full moon, right? All the lunar cycles, and there's all sorts of associations with that. Obviously, that's been, you know, talked about to the nth degree. I don't need to go into details about that, right? But we get the very personal quality of the moon, the motherly quality, the fact that the moon revolves around the earth instead of the sun, right? And so it's very personal to us, right? It's the next most personal thing besides our home, our unique individuality on this planet, Earth, right? Earth is first, moon is second. Mars, Venus are third. I mean, there's no real order because the sun kind of trumps all of that because of its size and magnitude and mass, right? So, but anyway, yeah, the personal the personal thing, the most personal is the Earth, right, which is represented by the angles, our individuality. Then the moon, Mars, Venus, Sun, Mercury, all those, right? Mars external, right, and Mars is the first malefic out of all the planets, and Mars has to do with separation, and action and aggression. Why is Mars malefic? That's a really good question. I think Mars, because Mars is the first planet that separates us from the rest of the solar system, right? It's the first outer planet. And so there's a dividing line there. And so that division has a lot to do with Mars's nature, cutting, severing, right? It severs us from, separates us from the rest of the solar system. Something to that effect. Then we get to the asteroid belt and Ceres. And one of the things we can say about Ceres is that it's located, and I'm ignoring all these other asteroids, but you can draw similar conclusions about them. Ceres is located in between Mars and Jupiter, right? It's not yet Jupiter, where Jupiter is expansion and philosophy, right? So it's more mundane. It's pre-philosophy, you could say, Ceres. One of the things we could say about it. The other thing is that we can say it rules small things. If Jupiter rules expansion, then Ceres rules very small things that are pre-philosophical, right? So we're not yet into the philosophy. We're more into the mundane stuff. We're connecting with Mars, which is, physicality, aggression, separation, action in the world. So there's some qualities of that, right? So Ceres has to represent something more physical, something very small, something more mundane, right? Something where we don't get into our like deeply heady, right? Where the headiness of Jupiter, where we're really expanding into philosophy, right? So it rules, and you can tie in the mythology here somewhat, right? But only as a secondary factor, where Ceres was the goddess of agriculture, right? Some element of that. And that does, I think, Ceres rules very mundane activities, right? Mundane work. It has to be small things, not big things, right? Ceres tends to go out of bounds a lot, and I think it's more malefic when that happens. But yeah, it's just small, mundane stuff that's not very heady or intellectual. It's just like physical, small, mundane things. I mean, if we're drawing, if we're looking at that, the physical qualities, that's what it has to come to. Now, Jupiter, right, the gas giant, obviously, we have all the associations with Jupiter, but it's here present in its relationship with all the other planets, right? Jupiter being the biggest planet of all, Sun not being a planet, right? Sun's obviously way bigger than Jupiter, but Jupiter is the biggest planet, and it's a gas giant. And here we get into philosophy. Here we get into wisdom. Here we get into teaching, and it's considered the great benefic, right? Venus is the lesser benefic. That's our inner feelings. Jupiter is our philosophy and wisdom and religion and higher studies and adventure, and it can be very passionate. It can also be very expansive, right? Tying it to its domicile rulers in Sag and domicile signs in Sag and Pisces. Particularly Pisces, there is this a quality of Jupiter that is very expansive, right? Towards excess and loss even. more so represented in Neptune, but we'll get to that later. Jupiter we can see, right? We can see it in the night sky, and that's important. We don't see it in the day sky, we see it in the night sky. So at least 50% of the time, less than 50% of the time, right? If it's there up in the sky, we'll see it at night. And so this is relevant because Jupiter still will represent physical things, right? That's why we can claim that all these inner planets are rulers of houses, rulers of signs, rather, because the light, it has to do with the light. Light shines from Jupiter. We can see it with our naked eye, right? So that means there's a physical relationship to life on Earth. The light is coming to Earth. That's an important concept, right? So yeah, it rules expansion. It rules big things. It rules philosophy, wisdom, teachers, benefic stuff, excess, exuberance, jovial, you know, yeah, like a materialism, like expansive materialism, overly excessiveness as well. Okay. Now Saturn is the bounds, right? Saturn is the boundaries. It is also a gas giant, but it's smaller than Jupiter, but it has very prominent rings. And it is the final planet that we can see with the naked eye, with a small exception, which I'll get to, right? So Saturn represents the limitations. And Saturn has similar qualities to Jupiter in a way because they're both gas giants, right? So when we're talking about the sort of laws of our society, that falls to Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter would be more the philosophical side. Saturn would be more the hard law about the hard and great, like the systems that we've come to accept as, you know, in any society, in any given society. It will be the organization, the systems, the final word, right? Libra is exalted in Saturn's sign. Saturn is exalted in Libra, sorry, in Venus's sign, showing that Saturn is being the final bounds, rules balance, or is exalted in balance in law, because Libra has to do with law and documents and legalities, right? And so, you know, if Jupiter is making the case for law, Saturn's making the final decision for it. Saturn is the final arbiter of what is and isn't you know, acceptable within a society. The glass ceiling. It is the systems, the government, the groups, the organizations, the physical enforcement of the law would be Mars, but the organization behind it would be Saturn. Saturn is the boss. Saturn's the leader, right? Saturn, you know, is the upholding of the law. Yeah, Saturn's also restriction and denial, right? We get all that, but it has to do with it being the final planet that we can see visibly with our naked eye, right? Then we get to Uranus, and Uranus's uniqueness is that it is outside of the bounds of Saturn. That's what is, you know, unique about it. Also, its orientation is that it spins on its side, or it spins vertically. Sorry, and it does have rings, right? So it has more of a vertical orientation. And its uniqueness is that it's outside of the bounds of Saturn. So Uranus does represent freedom and rebellion. You know, one of the associations which doesn't get talked about or gets misinterpreted is that people think it's just like revolution, but it actually just rules politics and social issues in general, right? Uranus. That's because it has a big picture, right? It's sort of like if Saturn is the governing bodies and governing laws, Uranus is thinking outside of that into the ideals of what could of how we could govern a society. So it rules all those things. One of the unique things about Uranus is that you can see Uranus sometimes, right? And so that is very telling in Uranus's nature, because of its that the light sometimes does hit the earth and sometimes it doesn't, right? So that's like the lightning symbolism. Boom, the light's hitting the earth, then it doesn't. So it rules invisible things that are suddenly visible, right? Suddenly visible. So accidents, lightning bolts, sudden events. So Uranus can sometimes show up as real events, real people. So we say, the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they don't rule anything because they're not physical. Well, Uranus can be, right? Uranus can be. Uranus sometimes is, sometimes isn't. It's one of those things. It's like lights on, lights off, lights on, lights off. That's the nature of electricity. It's on, off, on, off. And so it's sort of like, Uranus's nature is sort of like sleeping, 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 bam, explosion, sudden event, sudden realization, satori, nirvana, awakening, or accident, sudden death, sudden events like the sudden breakup, sudden happening, sudden fortune, sudden anything, right? Very sudden because of that nature where the light is not seen and then it's seen and then it's not seen, right? That quality, right? And being outside the realms of Saturn also gives Uranus this incredible advantage where it's like, everyone is beholden to Saturn on the inside, except for Uranus. Uranus doesn't give a fuck. All right, that meme where it's like that guy with holding the balloons. Everyone wants to be like, except for Uranus. Uranus doesn't give a fuck, and Uranus is floating all the way, right? That's its nature, right? And even more so than Neptune, because of the uniqueness that Uranus is just outside the bounds of Saturn. Neptune is way outside. It's not even thinking about that. Uranus is. Uranus is like, I'm free from Saturn. So Uranus represents freedom. It represents freedom from boundaries and limitations, right? And if Saturn is the glass ceiling, Uranus is above the glass ceiling, and Uranus is sort of the freedom to envision a better glass ceiling, a better system, a better Saturn, right? Uranus has the bird's eye view on Saturn, and so Uranus is like, Saturn, you can do better. We can do better than this. We don't need all this tyranny bullshit, this fascism, this, crony, corrupt capitalism, this, phony Marxism, whatever it is. Uranus is like, we can do better than that. And that's why Uranus is like, all like political and social oriented. It's not just rebellion. People have like, they oversimplify. They're like, Uranus rules rebellion. So when Uranus is activated, we have rebellions. It's about all the systems. Rebellion, not rebellion. It's about having a more idealistic view of humanity and society, because it's got a better view than Saturn, right? It's got the bird's eye view on Saturn, right? Saturn's the law, Saturn's the government, Saturn's the system. Uranus has the bird's eye view on those systems, and it's like, look, we can do better, right? And it has the upper hand. So that's Uranus by its position. And notice I'm not drawing on any mythology at all. We don't fucking need mythology. I mean, it fills in the blanks, but people are like, when they don't know them, they just like automatically refer to mythology, and that's wrong, right? And then Chiron's in here. Chiron's very tiny, right? That's important to understand. Chiron's tiny, and tiny planets, tiny objects rule tiny things, right? Except for Pluto, which we'll get to. But Chiron's tiny, and Chiron goes in between Saturn and Uranus, and so Chiron has qualities of Saturn and qualities of Uranus. Its orbit is unique. It's unique. It's a little rock that's weird. It's a little weird rock, right? And so don't automatically go to the Chiron, the mythology. When you think about Chiron, think about a little weird rock that floats in between Saturn and Uranus, right? And that will tell you infinitely more than the mythology, because why should the mythology inform us about astrology? If astrology is real, why is it like, how is it connecting to mythology, right? That's really questionable. You can't just take it for granted. You can't just be like, oh, mythology has to be real because it makes, or I don't know what the rationale is. In fact, I think it's one of the failings of astrology to incorporate mythology so deeply into it. I think that's bullshit. I think it's fucking bullshit, right? And that's why, like, when people are all like, people obsess about like things like Lilith, right? Lilith is only an indication of the closeness of the moon. It's the apogee and perigee, right? How close or far the moon is. And they give all sorts of meaning to Lilith based on, because they call it Lilith, and there's a mythology of Lilith. Lilith is not even a planet, it's not even a point. So it's like, how it gets woo-woo, and it's like, that's not the kind of astrology that's not even astrology. It's fantastology or something like that. It's bullshitology, right? It's bullshittery. I see no evidence that Lilith has anything to do with that anyway, right? It's not a point. How can it hold on to a mythology? Unless it's just projection, unless we're creating it because we collectively believe in it, right? Well, I'm somebody who doesn't collectively believe in it, so it's not going to work all that well, because there are plenty of people who need something more, um, physical to attach to. Anyway, Chiron is going from Saturnian restriction and denial, right, which can cause wounds, to Uranian freedom and higher ideology, right? Uranus can be very idealistic because it's kind of seeing a bigger picture, and it doesn't rule. It's because it's invisible some of the time. It's not connecting. It's just sort of being abstract, right? It's not always connecting. Sometimes it can connect, sometimes it can't. It's like a higher philosophy, more idealistic philosophy than Jupiter, right? Where Jupiterian philosophy can be practical, Uranian philosophy may or may not be practical, right? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Right? You can have Uranian brilliance that just doesn't land. It doesn't grab, it doesn't hit, right? But sometimes it does, and then it's brilliant, right? Yeah. The other thing is that like we tend to like, one of the things that people say about Chiron is that it rules our deepest wounds. Well, that's bullshit, because Pluto can represent our deepest wounds. Neptune can represent our deepest wounds. Uranus can represent our deepest wounds. Saturn and Mars can also represent our deepest wounds, right? Depending on where they are on our chart, how they're aspected, right? How many planets they're touching, what hard aspect. So it's stupid. It's stupid. It's a literally stupid fucking thing to say Chiron represents our deepest wounds. Sometimes it doesn't fucking represent anything. There are plenty of people where Chiron doesn't represent anything because it's not well aspected. It just doesn't do anything. It's small. It's not aspecting anything. It's not in an important house. And it's just might as well not be there. That's what it means for some people. Like literally, people are like the amount of sameness that people, the amount of weight that people place on all these little like people will put the same amount of weight on Lilith as they will on like Jupiter, right? Or Chiron on and Saturn, right? Like it's like, no, there's weights to these planets, right? Ceres is not the same as Jupiter, right? Ceres is a little tiny fucking thing that doesn't do much. Same with Chiron, right? Chiron can have strong influence. Apparently it does, but way less than Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, right? Even Pluto, for whatever reason. I'm not sure the size difference, but Pluto is way more impactful, just experientially. Not that Chiron isn't, and I'm not trying to I'm just saying you have to weight everything out by its size and its relevance in a chart, right? People are always like want to know about their Lilith and their vertex, and like it's like, shut up. Like you don't even understand like basic astrology. What do you worry about that for? So anyway, and I'm not trying to say like Chiron doesn't represent those things. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, right? But it's definitely not our deepest wounds, right? And I don't think people should refer to it as the wounded healer, right? It's a weird fucking rock that orbits between Saturn and Uranus. That's more accurate. All right. Now Neptune rules invisible things, because Neptune is actually the first planet that we don't see at all. So Neptune represents all the invisible stuff. So fantasy, illusion, delusion, right? It's a pretty big planet, if you notice, but we don't see it. So it's like, arts, movies, cinema, photography, esoteric stuff, spiritual stuff, subconscious stuff, right? All the invisible things, dream world, because we don't see it. That's the main archetype right there. We don't see it. It rules invisible stuff. We see Uranus sometimes. That's why it's like nothing, lightning, right? Lightning bolt. Neptune is no lightning, no lightning. We don't see it at all. It's invisible things. So it can rule like invisible things. If it's in the sixth house, it can rule invisible health things, right? It can rule, drugs and alcohol, obviously. Fantasy, illusion, delusion, exotic stuff. I mean, it's just all the unseen things, right? So everything that's unseen, the subconscious mind, the dream world, that's all that is. Then we get to Pluto. And Pluto is not that big, but for whatever reason, Pluto has enormous influence. And I picked out a little meme to demonstrate this. I think it's really relevant, so I'm gonna over here. So this is my not my Pluto meme, but this is a meme that I think demonstrates Pluto pretty well. I don't know if we can get a bigger version of this. No, let's just expand it. I was gonna make my own one, but it doesn't really matter. But anyway, so like this could be Mars, right? This is you, right? Obviously, the you as an individual. This is Mars, this is Saturn, this is Pluto. Now Pluto has the outer position, the outer view. It is a malefic, very much so. And it has the bird's eye view out of all the planets. And I think it's this way because we've given it a lot of, and here I'm going to contradict myself. We've given it so much importance that it sort of willingly took on and represented a whole sort of quality of archetypes in our in our modern world. It just does. It represents that everything that it's supposed to represent. We don't need to go into the mythology of it, but it does sort of represent this quality of this a malefic that has the fully outer view, where Pluto can represent masterminding a situation. It can represent strategy, right? This guy is obviously the superior strategist because he's got the outside view. He's got the gun pointed on all of them. He can kill any one of them. Obviously, it's not always about killing, but this is a very simplistic way of demonstrating Pluto's role. And it wants to have control, Pluto, right? This guy has control. This guy is controlling the situation. He controls the shots. He makes the decisions. He's masterminding. He's strategizing, right? So you get Pluto strong with like generals and chess masters, strategists, leaders, people who need to have like that really total control, right? Psychologically, he's on the superior side of things, right? Astrologically, there's some correlation there because maybe he did he did his chart right, and he picked the good electional chart, and so he got the superior position, right? Which is a form of strategy. It's a very Plutonic element, right? Astrology is all the outer planets. It's all three of the outer planets. So yeah, Pluto, for whatever reason, despite being small, has a very powerful, important role. And it's taken it on willingly for whatever reason. It's just filled a need, despite its size, it's filled a very important need in archetypally in astrology and society. Yeah, so let's go back to here, right? So Pluto, obviously being it's not the most outer planet, but it is the most outer planet that we give major importance to. And I think we were right on about that, right? So I don't think the mythology is devoid of meaning. I just think it's a secondary factor. And I think we need to put the initial factors first, right? Which are the order of the planets, their size, what they represent, you know, depicted by their qualities, right? Each one is unique. We can derive meaning from Saturn's rings. We can derive meaning from Uranus's vertical orientation, spin, and its position. Neptune being the planet that we can't see at all with the naked eye. Pluto also not being seen, but Pluto having the bird's eye view on all the planets, right? It's that the furthest out guy who's got, you know, like a good analogy is in Star Wars, where Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting, and Obi-Wan has the higher ground, and he says, "You lost, Anakin. I have the higher ground." That's Pluto. Pluto has the higher ground. Pluto is seeing all the other planets and says, "I have the higher ground. I have the strategy. I have the vision. I have the psychology. I have the astrology. I win. I've outmaneuvered you all. I've outstrategized you all, and therefore, yeah, I have the psychological superiority." Right? Then we get to Sedna way out here. Sedna, just referencing it, I don't think is as relevant as Pluto. It's just even way too slow, but it just moved into Gemini, so that's something interesting to think about, right? Sedna being pretty big and way far out there. And I think that's going to have a big impact. Like, think about Taurus, wherever Taurus lies in your chart, and then think about wherever Gemini lies in your chart. There will be some deep, slow-moving influence from Sedna that has shifted there. For me, it went from my 7th house to my 8th house. So we'll see how that plays out. It's too early to tell, but just start looking at that, right? So anyway, guys, I think I've demonstrated that really we can get so much out of the physical qualities of the planets that have nothing to do with their mythology, and we need to put that first. Instead of, like, we don't, with most of the planets, we know that we don't really apply all that mythology to most of the planets, but sometimes when we don't know what to do, we just immediately go to the mythology, and I think that's wrong. We should immediately go to the physical qualities, right, of the planets and their characteristics to derive meaning from them. That way we don't lose grounding. We keep grounded in reality. I'm gonna stop sharing. And we don't get overly abstract in our head and start thinking that Lilith is comparable to Jupiter and Saturn. It's like, you know, it's like ridiculous, right? Or Chiron is our deepest wounds. When you know, our wounds can be, you know, Plutonian or Saturnian or Martian or Uranian, right? So it's silly. Why out of all the malefics would Chiron represent our deepest wounds? Chiron can represent wounds, but probably not our deepest wounds, right? Plenty of times I think it's not. I think it's wrong. I think it's just wrong, right? It's because people are like immediately going to mythology and, you know, not being Uranian, right? They're not drawing on their Uranus enough. They're being very Saturnian. They're being confined to what the status quo is. The status quo says Chiron is the wounded healer. Therefore, that's what nobody's questioning it. They're just parroting it. And that's not even thinking. That's just conforming, right? If you're not able to disagree with the consensus, you're not even thinking yet. You haven't even begun to think. You're just conforming. You're just a parrot. Might as well be a computer. Like, shut off your brain. Just stop thinking. Just be a computer and just admit that you don't know how to think, because that's not thinking. Thinking is disagreeing. If you can't disagree, then you can't think. Thinking means the possibility that everyone is wrong. If that's not an option for you, if you can't go there, if you can't be like, well, everyone can't be wrong, then you can't even think. You're not even thinking it. You're not. You haven't started thinking. You have to be able to think. You have to be able to say the consensus is wrong. Everyone's wrong. Potentially, right? Not that they are, right? It's not that always everyone's wrong, or that the majority can't be right sometimes. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but you have to be willing to say they're not right, right? The history is wrong. Everyone's wrong. You have to be willing to trust your own thought process. That's what thinking is, right? So immediately jumping to, like, one thing like, oh, Chiron, everyone calls it the wounded healer, therefore it's the wounded healer, and it's your deepest wound. It's like you're not even thinking yet. So anyway, guys. Or Lilith represents all your sexuality. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Like I've seen it show up sometimes like that. But maybe it's just a coincidence. Like I haven't seen any real evidence that Lilith has anything to do with sexuality at all. I know it has to do with the closeness and the farthest, the moon, the apogee perigee, right? And that there's relevance there. As far as like attaching the mythology to a non-existent point, mathematical point, I don't know that that works at all, right? I don't know that that's relevant at all. Maybe there's some subtle connection, but I think more we have to rely on the physicality of what it really actually physically means. And that's what astrology is to me. It's physical stuff. Like there's actual bodies out there floating around, right? Doing shit, right? How can they not? They're huge. And I understand that these are like beings. Lilith is not a being, right? Lilith is a mathematical point. Neither are the nodes. The nodes are not a being. The nodes are not the moon, right? They're not a spirit. The moon's a spirit. The sun's a spirit. The earth is a spirit. Mars is a spirit, right? They have a soul. There's their consciousness. The nodes are not in the way we understand them. Neither is Lilith. So we can't apply the same things, right? So anyway, guys, I think that's it for now. I just wanted to demonstrate that really you don't need the mythology. It could be a secondary influence, but it's not the primary one. And this isn't bullshitology. This isn't fantasology. There's grounded. It's very grounded. We can keep it grounded. We can keep it, in order not to fly off into fantasy woo bullshit land. You have to stay grounded in the physical qualities, because otherwise you're just floating off. And that's why people don't like astrology. A lot of people are just like Chiron wounded. Like you're talking about the fucking mythology. Like maybe it makes sense. Maybe there's things there, but the only reason that would make sense is because we think it makes sense, right? It's like we're putting our own psychic spell on Chiron and being like, this is what Chiron represents, and therefore there's some sort of reflection there, right? But it wouldn't be that way without us. It's not like Chiron automatically has this quality of the mythology that it's supposed to be tied to. We're creating that. But there's a more fundamental meaning to it, which is that it's a weird little rock floating in between Saturn and Uranus. And start there, because you'll get a lot from that, right? Weird little rocks. If you have a weird little rock in part of your chart, that might be very painful if it's badly aspected. And it might cause a lot of rejection and wounds from rejection. But if it's not, it won't. Right? But the same with all malefics. They're all going to behave badly when they're badly aspected. And they're all going to cause wounds. Think Mars is not going to cause a wound? You're wrong. Right? Like I have Mars conjunct the MC. I have a big gaping scar right across my knee. That's a wound, right? Who said, do we say Mars is the wounded healer? No. Why? Why don't we say Mars is the wounded healer? Saturn can create wounds too. I mean, why don't we say Saturn's the wounded healer? Uranus, I have Uranus on the ascendant. I suffered terrible trauma. Uranus is one of the main trauma indicators. Why don't we call Uranus the wounded healer? Why don't we say Uranus represents our deepest wound, right? So again, we don't, some of these things we derive meaning from based on what we know about them. Others we automatically go to the mythology, and that's a gaping discrepancy in astrology that needs addressing, right? Why are we always going to mythology when we're talking about some things, and other things we just know what they mean based on imperial evidence? Why not just be more imperialistic about astrology? Let's look at the evidence instead of just automatically going to fantasy bullshitology. So, all right. I think that's it for today. That's it for my planets, meanings of planets based on their actual physical qualities. So yeah, guys, I hope you found this interesting. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Book a reading with me, macrogoalmachine@yahoo.com. That's my email address. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Yeah, hopefully it's not something stupid, but I can't control everyone, so that's inevitable at some point, I guess. Anyway, guys, Joe Axman, the astrologer. Signing off. Win before you win. Laugh it off. Take a victory laugh. And I'll see you again soon. All right, thanks, bye.